Anytime, any day. Why not right now? Stop looking up to your boss and start being your own boss. Don't work for paychecks. Work for dreams with no regrets. This is Cracking the Entrepreneur Code. If you have the passion, we'll create the blueprint. Now, your host. You know him from his 7 tips to build the business you always wanted, and now you're about to hear a lot more. Jack H.M. Wong.
Welcome to another episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast. I'm your host, Jack Wong. Well, funny thing is that I have very interesting experiences. So in this episode, I want to really share with you further to my discussion on the word responsibility. So I want to take this episode to share with you a real life example, in fact, true stories, whereby it demonstrated what entrepreneurs' attitude and mindset should be. We say do whatever it takes. We do not lay blame, justify, and never quit. If you cannot remember what these principles are, go back to my previous episodes. Remember episodes number 9 and 10, we talk about responsibility. So the question I have for you is, if you are facing setbacks, or if you are having an obstacle or a challenge that somehow the things that you plan to do, somehow it doesn't go your way. So what do you do? So I remember when I was an employee, because it's not really my responsibility if I screw up something. So the mindset of an employee, I can imagine some of you might say the same thing. That is, if it doesn't work today, fine, I can always do it tomorrow. So how many of you actually have watched this movie called Rocky? In Rocky, I remember the coach of Rocky actually said, there's no tomorrow. You either do it now or never. So basically in entrepreneurship, if I do not do things that I'm supposed to do, or if I plan to do something today and yet for some reason I face a setback, there's actually no tomorrow. You think about it, because the mindset is, if I do it tomorrow, and what if tomorrow I am still facing the same setback? And you know what? Our mind will say, well, since it is a setback, never mind, and I will do it tomorrow. So you see the process, the cycle repeats itself, and eventually you keep on repeating, and you will not be able to do what you are supposed to do. So let me share with you 2 examples with regard to my 2 podcast interviews. And my last 2 podcast interviews actually were good demonstrations of do whatever it takes to make it happen. So let me share with you the first one. This podcast show was something that I've arranged for a long time. Why? Because every time when I said to the host, I'm able to do it at this time, you know what? They came back to me and said, I'm sorry, there's a last minute thing and therefore we need to reschedule it. So this podcast show that I've arranged was already a few months back. So imagine if I were to do it in a few months later and suddenly the host came back again and said, I'm sorry, you need to do it, you need to reschedule the time. Well, you can feel you can sense certain kind of frustration, isn't it? Right? How many of you can relate to this? So what happened was that in this podcast show, it was originally arranged at 7 a.m. Singapore time. So it's not too early for me, because 7 a.m. I typically wake up at 6:30. If I need to do a podcast interview at that hour, I will actually wake up even earlier. So that's fine with me. So I've planned, I'm getting myself ready. Usually I will wake up at least half an hour getting myself ready, so that I know that I'll be in the right spirit, right moment to put whatever I have to the show. So at 7 o'clock, I was waiting. I say, how come the host didn't Skype me? So I wonder what happened. So I waited for like 7:10, so waited for 10 minutes, and I see nothing from the host. There was no email coming. There was no notification coming to me. So I said, maybe they had another repeated instance whereby they need to do the show later on. So I'm waiting for them the request to reschedule the show. Who knows, at 7:33, I've got an email from the host administrator. And she said, well, we have some administrative and technology issue. So just wonder whether I will still be online and do the show. At that point, I was thinking, oh my God, it's already 33 minutes late. Well, at this point, I can say, you know what, it is your fault. And because you didn't honor your time agreement, so why should I be on the show? And why should I be doing the show based on your time frame? I mean, I can do that because that is one possible mindset you can adopt, isn't it? But what I've chosen to do is, okay, what's the point of arguing about tech failure? Because when you do things online, you will have to face the risk, the challenge, or sometimes the failure of technology. I mean, this is the truth, okay? So what happened was that I quickly emailed back to the administrator and said, yep, I will be ready within the next 10 minutes because I was having my breakfast at that point in time. So I say 10 minutes later, I'll be ready. So I get back to my station, I quickly check, I see nothing, I didn't see any notification, but I'm patiently waiting for further indication. So at 8 o'clock, the administrator came to me and said, well, the technicians are actually out for dinner. So because this podcast host is from United States of America, so it is actually their dinner time. So would it be okay for me to wait for 1 more hour so that when the technicians comes back, we can actually set the show up? And instead of doing it via the original platform, we will be doing it via Skype. I say, whatever works for you, because for me, I just want to get the show done so that I can have this item checked off from my list. So I said, you know what, let you do whatever it takes. Make sure technicians are ready within an hour. I'll be patiently waiting for 1 hour. So you know what? The truth is, at 9 o'clock, the technicians are ready. So the show began at 9 plus, and I ended the show within the next 35 minutes. And now the show is actually up on their site. So I thank them for being tolerant of this tech failure, because on their part as host, I can imagine if I were the host, I would feel absolutely bad for making something not happen. But for me, because I'm looking for a win and the host is also looking for a win, so what's the point of cursing, swearing, or blaming each other? So this is a very good demonstration, in my opinion, of doing whatever it takes. Okay, just happened last night. Last night meaning that when I'm recording this episode, it happened last night. So again, I was chatting with someone from Chicago, and the podcast host said we were doing Zoom call, yet she couldn't hear my voice. So I don't know why, because this is the first time I encountered this Zoom problem. Okay, so she didn't know what to do. So we were spending the next 30 minutes figuring out what exactly the problem was and how we could solve the problem. We couldn't do anything. So what happened? So I said, okay, again, the mindset could be number one, well, let's make it another time. But I was looking at my calendar. This particular episode, this podcast interview was arranged sometimes in May this year. So you know what? It's already a few months. I was waiting for this interview. So what's the point of asking the host to reschedule? Probably the show will be on in 2018. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. So to actually reschedule it. So I said, okay, what else can I do? Because as an entrepreneur, my job is to actually find solution for my clients. If I do not know the answer, at least I will find a solution to the client. Or if I know the solution, I will be the one helping my client. So I treat the host as my client in that instance. And guess what? I propose, I say, why not you allow me to be the recorder of the show? Use my Zoom facility instead of your facility. and see whether it works. And if it works, then what I would do is I would make sure the recording is done properly. I will send you back the link for you to do further editing. So you know what? The host said, well, there's no other solution, knowing that we have already spent half an hour trying to figure out things. So the host said, okay, let's do that. And guess what? Well, I became the administrator for her, although I'm also the guest for her podcast show. Sounds very funny. I mean, I'm performing two roles at the same time. First time in my life as a podcast guest, doing admin work for the host and being the guest of the host. Anyway, the story is that in the end, what happened is that the show was done properly. So I stayed for another 15 minutes to wait for the recording to be done. I send the link back to the podcast host and say thank you for having me on the show, and acknowledge the fact that we had failure of the technology. We didn't know what to do, but we created a win-win situation. Let's have further collaboration in future, because you and I seem to be able to synchronize very well. So that's how I ended with a thank you note. So these two examples have demonstrated one thing about entrepreneurs' attitude and mindset. When you are taking responsibility for what you say you will do it, you'll be able to find the resources that allow you to do what you have to do to make things happen. And at the same time, the good news is it's a win-win situation for the other party. So if you have any comments, feedback, I love that. Please send it to me. Or if somebody in your circle will love this episode, if you believe that's the case, please let them know. Ask them to subscribe so that they get notification of future episodes of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast show. I'm your host, Jack Wong, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, be relentless and take responsibility. Bye.
To continue cracking the entrepreneur code, subscribe for more episodes and download the Amazon bestseller, Cracking the Entrepreneur Code, 7 Tips to Build the Business You Always Wanted at crackingentrepreneur.com. Learn more about author and host Jack H.M. Wong and book your 30-minute discovery session to overcome any professional challenge at jackhmwong.com/apply.